These are the headlines we're following at this hour. U.S. President Joe Biden held phone talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and discussed the possibility of a tactical pause in Gaza to get humanitarian aid in and civilians out while releasing hostages. Israel remains opposed to the idea as well as a ceasefire until all the hostages are released. Data from the Korea Development Institute shows signs of recovery in the South Korean economy on the back of increased production in chips and strong auto exports. Concerns remain, though, over high oil prices and interest rates globally. The South Korean government will open the first line of GTX trains in March. The high-speed trains will dramatically reduce the commute times to Seoul from the surrounding metropolitan area, while making the area a hyper-connected economic zone. Good afternoon. U.S. President Joe Biden held phone talks with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and discussed the possibility of a tactical pause in Gaza to get humanitarian aid in and civilians out while releasing hostages. Israel remains opposed to the idea as well as a ceasefire until all the hostages are released. Our Yoon has the latest.
U.S. President Joe Biden and Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu held talks on Monday over a so-called tactical pause for humanitarian reasons, as well to try to secure the release of hostages held by Hamas. According to the White House spokesperson John Kirby, the two leaders discussed a temporary pause in fighting to allow civilians in Gaza to move to a safer place and ensure assistance for those in need. Kirby said that the president and the prime minister approved of the increase in humanitarian aid assistance during the previous week, and discussed the need to increase aid provision by enhancing the capability to inspect and prepare trucks entering Gaza. The president reaffirmed his support for Israel and securing Israeli citizens from threats, including from Hamas, while also emphasizing the need to protect Palestinian civilians and minimizing harm to them. Netanyahu has so far made it clear that Israel would not support a ceasefire, saying that such a move would equate to surrendering to Hamas, with the White House agreeing that a general ceasefire would only benefit the militants. The discussion also included the West Bank and the importance of holding extremist Israeli settlers responsible for their actions during an uptick of violence in the area. The White House also said that Biden and Netanyahu have agreed to continue their discussions on matters related to the conflict, with Reuters reporting that John Kirby said the conversation is at the beginning stage, not at the end. This comes as U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken visited Israel again last Friday for meetings with Israeli authorities over the need for humanitarian aid for Gaza and the release of hostages held by Hamas. Netanyahu rejected Blinken's plan for a humanitarian pause, saying that hostages would need to be released first. Yoon, Arirang News.
The growing calls for a humanitarian pause or a ceasefire come as civilian deaths continue to rise. Now, a month into the Israel-Hamas war, more than 10,000 Palestinians have been reportedly killed, and one child has been killed every 10 minutes. Lee Seung-jae has more.
Gaza's health ministry said Monday that more than 10,000 Palestinians have been killed since the start of the armed conflict between Israel and Hamas. Among those killed, more than 4,100 are children. UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres called Gaza a graveyard for children, with the UN Palestinian Refugee Agency adding that one child has been killed every 10 minutes. The World Health Organization has also raised great concern over the health of pregnant women, new mothers, and infants in the Gaza Strip, where many hospitals and medical facilities have shut down due to ongoing airstrikes by Israel. According to the WHO, there are about 50,000 new mothers and pregnant women in the Gaza Strip, with more than 180 babies born every day. It added that 4,600 pregnant women and 380 newborns residing in refugee camps operated by the UN throughout Gaza need treatment. Meanwhile, Israeli forces advanced deeper into Gaza on Monday with more airstrikes overnight. Monday's airstrikes and ground attacks focused on the northern half of the Gaza Strip, where the Israel Defense Forces believe Hamas has most of its strongholds. On Sunday, the Israeli military struck over 450 Hamas targets while also taking control of a Hamas military compound. Within the compound were underground tunnels, observation points, and training facilities for Hamas fighters. Following a two-day suspension, dozens of foreign passport holders, as well as some medical evacuees on Monday, passed through the Rafah crossing from Gaza into Egypt. According to the Gaza Border Authority, Egyptians and foreign citizens already on pre-approved lists issued since last week were allowed through. 80 dual nationals and 17 medical evacuees left Gaza through Rafah, with 48 aid trucks crossing in the other direction. 이승재, Arirang News.
New U.S. Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights Julie Turner said Washington will cooperate with partners and allies and give strength to the voices of defectors in order to resolve the human rights issues in North Korea. Turner was speaking at her inauguration in Washington on Monday, where she promised to achieve 5 priorities outlined in her Senate confirmation hearing. Those promises include cooperation with partners such as South Korea to improve the human rights of North Korean defectors, strengthening accountability at the UN level, and urging North Korea to improve human rights. The Special Envoy for North Korean Human Rights is an ambassador-level position involved in overall formulation and implementation of the U.S. government's human rights policy toward North Korea. Latest data shows signs of recovery in the South Korean economy on the back of increased production in chips and strong auto exports. Concerns remain, though, over high oil prices and interest rates globally. Our economics correspondent Lee Soo-jin tells us more.
South Korea's economy is showing signs of moderate recovery in certain areas. According to a monthly report released by the Korea Development Institute on Tuesday, the ease in the slowdown of the economy was mostly driven by the rise in production across various industries. Overall production increased by 2.8% on year in September, higher than the 1.3% from a month earlier. Growth was seen in industrial production on the back of a recovery in semiconductor demand, with chip production surging 23.7% on year in September, compared to 8.4% the previous month. While service production showed a slowdown compared to the previous year due to the base effect, it saw a moderate increase of 0.4% from the month before due to the rise in demand for travel. Production in construction also showed continued growth. Meanwhile, exports showed a slight recovery on the back of increased exports to the U.S. Exports to the U.S. in October rose sharply by more than 17% from the previous year, but exports to China fell 9.5%. Vehicle exports maintained robust growth in October, and semiconductor exports showed signs of recovery. The increase in imports was mostly led by the rise in crude oil imports. Overall, the trade balance in October recorded a surplus of $1.64 billion. However, external factors continue to weigh on the South Korean economy as the global economy grapples with uncertainties such as monetary policy tightening and the Israel-Hamas conflict. Growing geopolitical tensions have fueled volatility in oil prices, and the continued high interest rates in major economies has led to subdued business sentiment. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
The South Korean government will open the first line of GTX trains in March. The high-speed trains will dramatically reduce the commute times to Seoul from the surrounding metropolitan area, while making the area a hyper-connected economic zone. Shin Se-byuk reports.
South Korea plans to establish a broader economic zone through expediting the opening of the GTX high-speed commuter rail network. The first phase will begin with GTX-A from Dongtan Station, about 30 kilometers south of the capital, to Suseol in Seoul's Gangnam-gu district next March. During his visit to the GTX-A construction site on Monday, President Yoon Suk-yeol noted the commute from Dongtan to Suseol will be around 19 minutes when the line opens. He added more lines, GTX-B and C, will be opened faster, making Seoul reachable in 30 minutes from anywhere in the greater capital region.
수도권 어디든 간에 30분 이내에 도착하고 서울까지 어느 지역을 가든지 1시간 이내에는 다 갈 수 있게, 그리고 중심부까지는 30분 이내에.
The GTX-B line will connect Incheon just west of Seoul to Namyangju, east of the capital, and the C line will connect Yangju some 30 kilometers north of the capital to Suwon, just south of Seoul. Construction on the C line will begin at the end of this year, with work on the B line set to start early next year. The GTX project is one of Yoon's election pledges and part of his administration's policy tasks, where he vowed to open up an era of 30-minute commutes to and from the Seoul metropolitan area. President Yoon stressed that the GTX isn't just a transportation solution, but rather a way to create a hyper-connected economic zone. He emphasized its potential to change the economic landscape near GTX lines, such as stabilizing the real estate market and generating more job opportunities. The Korea Transport Institute expects the GTX project to affect the economy to the tune of some 30 trillion won, or $23 billion. 210,000 jobs are also expected to be created. As for fares, the president said the anticipated fare will be around 4,000 won, or roughly around $3 one way, but added the government will ensure fares will remain affordable.
저소득층과 어려운 서민들에게는 약 53%의 최대 할인율을 차등 적용해서 나머지는 정부 재정으로, 중앙정부와 지방정부 재정으로 이렇게 분담을 해서 지원할 계획입니다.
The president also promised more routes, including lines D, E, and F, each connecting the Seoul capital area with the outskirts of the metropolitan region. 신새벽 아리랑 뉴스.
And South Korea is also getting a step closer to realizing another traffic solution. An air taxi has successfully made its first public test flight in a rural county with the aim of operating in urban skies in 2025. Our Shin-young has a report.
This air taxi takes off vertically from its vertiport and flies for about 5 minutes without carrying a person. Developed by the Korea Aerospace Research Institute and domestic firms, the KUAM OPUF can carry one person and fly at a speed of up to 240 kilometers per hour, generating less noise compared to a helicopter. It was the first public demonstration of the aircraft following a test run with a smaller size model 2 years ago. The demonstration was in line with the first stage of the Korean UAM demonstration project, known as the KUAM Grand Challenge, which kicked off in August to test the safety of urban air mobility aircraft as well as related infrastructure ahead of commercialization. Along with the flight demonstration in Goheung, Jeollanam-do Province, a vertiport, passenger terminal, traffic management system, and AI-based control tower were all unveiled, showcasing their safety and integrated operational capabilities.
The government will refine regulations tailored for UAM to create an environment where firms and researchers can develop technology without a hitch. I hope we can work together towards opening the urban sky by 2025.
In October, the Transport Ministry announced that the UAM Act had been given the green light at a plenary session of the National Assembly. This enactment lays down the groundwork for companies to actively develop technology and test out new services without being shackled down by the existing aviation laws.
Aviation regulations are extensive and strict, but electric vertical takeoff and landing aircraft don't require the same level of standards. So, for UAM, we've excluded unnecessary existing rules, except those related to safety, although even some of those could be relaxed.
He added that the government plans to expand the use of UAM from transportation services to logistics, emergency care, and firefighting services. Companies that have demonstrated the safety of their technologies in the first stage of the KUAM Grand Challenge will move on to the second stage, which will take place in metropolitan area from next July for about a year. Shin-young, Arirang News, Goheung.
The prices of overseas group tours for Koreans has seen the biggest jump in 13 years amid higher prices of travel services. According to Statistics Korea on Tuesday, overseas group tours in October cost 15.9% more than they did at the same time last year. This is the biggest on-year jump since September 2010. The rise comes as global inflation pushes up the cost of flight tickets, accommodation, and food, while increased oil prices lead to higher fuel tax. Industry sources also point to changing travel patterns as more people tend to travel in smaller groups out of post-pandemic safety concerns and shift away from hitting multiple shopping spots. Meanwhile, prices for domestic group tours are on the decline due to base effect and the rollout of discount coupons. Now the weather is getting chilly, but with prices of everything going up, so are the prices of popular winter street food, including the famous fish-shaped pastry called 붕어빵. Yoon has a story.
붕어빵 has long been a favorite winter street food in South Korea. The fish-shaped pastry is filled with red bean paste or sugary custard. But the jump in price of this beloved snack shows the reality of the increase in consumer prices. Last winter, customers could get 2 pieces of 붕어빵 for 1,000 won, or roughly 80 cents. But this year, street vendors have prepared signs that read 3 for 2,000 won, roughly $1.50. And in some popular areas, customers will be paying 1,000 won for 1 piece.
It used to be a go-to snack when I have 2,000 won left in my wallet, but I don't think that's possible anymore.
I remember it being 3 pieces for 1,000 won when I was young. If it's 1,000 won for 1 piece, maybe people who really like it will still buy it, but I don't think I will.
What's contributed to the hike in prices of this winter street food is the increase in general prices, from ingredients to fuel costs. The wholesale price of the red bean paste has increased by 33% from previous years. And the prolonged impact of the Russia-Ukraine war is keeping prices of key ingredients very high. Compared to before the war, the price of flour has jumped 36%, sugar 34%, and milk 17%. The jump in consumer prices has shocked customers into eating out less, as it affected everyday go-to foods like fried chicken and black bean noodles. But with no sign of inflation easing, people are now hesitant to enjoy winter street snacks as well. Yoon, Arirang News.
Let's take a look at what's going on in the world now. The current Russian President Vladimir Putin seeks to stay in power by running in the March 2024 elections. This decision by the 71-year-old former KGB agent will keep him in power through 2030. While Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov commented that the campaign has not been officially announced yet, Reuters sources stated that the decision has been made and the Kremlin's advisors are in preparation. Putin reportedly enjoys an approval rating of 80% inside Russia. He has been in control of Russia since succeeding Boris Yeltsin in 1999. The election comes amid the ongoing Russo-Ukraine war and Western sanctions on Moscow. In Africa, mass flooding has left at least 30 people dead as of Monday and tens of thousands displaced in Kenya and Somalia. The flooding began last month as the 2023 Deir seasonal rains intensified. The United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said the overflowing of the Juba and Shabelle rivers left many dead, homes and infrastructure destroyed. It also said some 2,400 residents of Somalia's Luke district are trapped by the floodwaters. The heavy rains in Somalia came after 4 years of extreme drought. In neighboring Kenya, the death toll has risen to 15 since Friday, with the Kenya Red Cross saying that flash floods killed over 1,000 livestock and destroyed over 240 acres of farmland. On Monday in the UK, protesters from the Just Stop Oil Climate Change Action Group damaged the glass cover of a painting at London's National Gallery. 2 protesters in their early 20s were arrested after using safety hammers to smash the glass cover of the 17th century painting. Dozens of other Just Stop Oil activists who were blocking roads in nearby Whitehall were also detained. The painting, Rockaby Venus by Diego Velázquez, was previously damaged in 1914 after being slashed by Canadian suffragette Mary Richardson. Off the coast of the Italian island of Sardinia, local amateur divers on Saturday discovered up to 50,000 ancient Roman coins. According to Italy's Ministry of Culture, the recovered ancient coins are likely to be from a shipwreck from the 4th century off the coast of Arzachena in Sardinia. The bronze coins from this period are called follies, introduced around 294 AD by the then Roman Emperor Diocletian. Authorities have stated that the coins are in exceptionally well-preserved state. A similar discovery of almost 23,000 coins was made in 2013 in the UK county of Devon. Kim Si-young, Arirang News.
The season's first cold wave alerts were issued this morning as a blast of cold air filtered into the nation. The lowest temperatures of the season were also recorded this morning at 4.4 degrees Celsius. But for the afternoon, conditions will be warming up a tad. Readings will quickly rise to 10 degrees in Seoul, but this is still about 5 degrees lower than the seasonal average. Gusty winds are in the forecast from time to time. Inland regions, including Seoul, will see winds gusting as fast as 15 to 20 meters per second. Regions with higher elevations will see even more violent winds. Make sure to secure any items that could get blown away. Winds will taper off later this evening. Daytime temperatures will get a touch warmer. Seoul and Chuncheon will get up to 10 degrees. Daegu will stay in single figures at 8 degrees Celsius. This round of cold snap will last until tomorrow. For this weekend, much colder temperatures are in the forecast. That's all for now, and here are the weather conditions around the world.
There are growing calls to stop the human suffering in the Israel-Hamas war, either through a ceasefire or a humanitarian pause. The two are technically different. The UN defines a ceasefire as a suspension of fighting agreed upon by both parties to a conflict. The UN, Egypt, China, Russia, Saudi Arabia, as well as the Pope want to see this happen. Meanwhile, a humanitarian pause means briefly halting hostilities purely for humanitarian purposes, such as getting aid in and civilians out. A key difference is that this pause is not ending hostilities in general. This is what the US, the UK, and Canada want, as they believe a ceasefire would allow Hamas to regroup and repeat their attack. But Israel, a US ally, remains against both options until all the hostages are released and so the fighting continues. This is where we end today's newscast. Thanks for watching.